All right, before we get to a survey of the audience and see what everyone is. So anyone that works in the nonprofit field, kind of raise your hand. In development side. Okay. And the philanthropy side of the field. All right, here we go. So welcome again to the Clinton School. My name is Nikolai, and our guest here is Jeff Walker. First, I kind of wanted you to tell me a little bit about where you grew up.
I grew up all over the South. I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, and my dad worked for General Electric, so I moved 8 times before I was 18. And lost my Southern accent when I was in Syracuse, New York for a year, somehow. But my dad was one of the first programmers of any computer in 1958, so picked up something related to technology interest from there. And then he was part of the NASA program for GE, and so I watched all the space crafts launch off from Florida, and so that had an indelible imprint on me. And particularly if you're looking at a bunch of people coming together to work on something that no one of them could ever accomplish by themselves. And it's like amazing.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be an astronaut until at 5th grade I had to get glasses. And that was one of the most devastating things in my life because I couldn't become one. And so then from there I had to recover. And wanted to be a business guy because my uncle was an entrepreneur in Southern Illinois. And I always thought he was cool.
And how'd you get to University of Virginia?
So UVA, I was in the South when I applied. Then I moved in when I was 18 to Connecticut. But I always knew I wanted to go somewhere that was fun, interesting. And so I guess I had heard of Thomas Jefferson at the time, obviously, but never really got into him until I arrived there. But fell in love with the place.
And you did follow that passion of business, and were very successful in the private equity field. To any of us here that may not be in that field, what does that mean?
So what's private equity? Private equity, like venture capital, we called it venture capital in 1984 when we set up our group. And we said, you know, it's doing transactions and investing in things that are interesting ideas that will help grow, right? So we did some TV stations in the Midwest, and we bought them cheap and sold them dear, and the guy improved value, and so they thought we knew what they were doing. And then we did Office Depot when it had 2 stores, and they said, I guess these guys can pick deals, and they continued to give us some capital, and we were actually the first partnership ever set up in a corporation. So under a bank at the time called Chemical Bank, we set up our operation and raised an original pool of funds from the bank itself and started building a team. And so private equity means that you're investing in private companies that are not public, and that you're using that capital to grow value and grow companies and grow ideas and bet on good CEOs, and that you're active, which means that you go on the boards of those companies and hopefully add value to help them grow. And then private equity, usually you sell them after about 5 years. Usually that's a fund you raise, and you try to take it public, or they're sold to other companies or other private equity shops or something to capitalize on that value, and then you get a piece of that. And so we set up that partnership to do that business, and everybody in our partnership participated. And so we were all for one and one for all. And we set up a unique cultural system because of that, really understanding that all of us together create more value than any of us by ourselves. And that started down the path of really thinking about this collaboration.
Did you feel that you had to wear a different hat when you were in your business side than when you would go to your philanthropic, on the boards of many organizations. Did you feel that you had a different hat in that time, that it wasn't necessarily the same Jeff Walker?
I tried not to. I actually have been trying to be mindful and be present in everything you do, and I've been working on that since I started actually meditating in 1977, actually 1973, in University of Virginia, but being present and being my own true self. And so we talk, actually at our firm, we talked about being able to see things more clearly if you're present and if you're truly listening. And so we worked on skills like listening skills and direct listening, and what does that mean? So that your mind is actually not thinking about the past or the future, it's picking out the present. And so I wanted to be the same person, whether I was at home or whether I was at work or whether I was in a nonprofit world. But trying to go back and forth between those worlds was interesting, because 15% of my life was always in the nonprofit space. It's something I always enjoyed, and I found it lowered the walls for me between other people I wanted to do even business with, because it gives you a reason to interact with them that's different than just doing a deal. You can interact with them about something that you're jointly passionate about or interested in, and having that same person, so then I could call them up on a deal and they would tell me the truth. And you know, it's a real advantage if people will tell you the truth and you're calling and trying to look for an investment or an opportunity, or saying, is this person a good person? Is this a good idea or not?
And in 2007, you quote unquote retired. I'm going to say retired, and now you spend 95% of your time on nonprofits. So what does that entail now?
So after 25 years, I moved from 15% of my life into 95% in the nonprofit space, and have never had more fun. It is a walls down, open exploration of how to go after some big ideas that nobody else has really done before with others. And it's like the early days of venture capital, when we were truly coming up with new ways of doing stuff. Now I found that it's a little boring. There's just another deal and another deal. And so after 25 years, I said, this is enough. And through 8 mergers at JPMorgan, and it's enough. And so I'd made enough and said, let me go out and try to increase that percentage of value and decrease suffering in the world if I can. And became executive resident at Harvard Business School and Kennedy School for 2 years, half-time. And it picked up and been working on another project with another friend of mine, a guy named Ray Chambers. And we started working on the idea of developing innovative tools for global development, and raising a pool of capital to support a guy named Jeff Sachs at Columbia University and Earth Institute to test that. And so I started finding that there's a way for me to actually add value, in my perspective, but also other people said that too. So rather than just bringing money to the table, you brought your mind. And you brought ideas related to business, but not necessarily all of them. And one of the discoveries that I had when we start teaching social enterprise, which is kind of having a social purpose as well as at times profit focus, or total just straight social purpose, was that business people, either one, didn't have a clue what was going on in the nonprofit world, and so whenever they were around it or giving or on their boards, they kind of just sat there. Or number 2, they thought they knew everything about being on a board in the nonprofit world and started telling everybody all what to do. Both of those things are bad, right? And so trying to figure out what that merger of opportunity is between those ideas that are good ones, like focusing on a return is not a bad thing, but focusing only on a return is a terrible thing. Focusing on a story is not a bad thing, but only story is not a good thing either, right? So what is that balance? So starting to explore what that balance was over time allowed me to bridge both worlds.
And around this time you met, or I guess it was before, but you met your co-author of your book, Jennifer. So how did you guys meet?
So Ray Chambers said to me one day, he said, there's somebody you really need to meet. She's like amazing. She was a big fundraiser at Washington University, 3 other colleges as well, and she brings heart to this. People actually like to meet with her. And they'd rather meet with her, and this is Ray talking, than me. Because, we talked about, okay, this sounds good. And so I met Jennifer, I remember in New York at a lunch. We just started connecting. Like, you believe this? I believe that? Oh, that's interesting. Gee, you've raised all this money. Well, I've been involved in fundraising a lot through Monticello when I was chairman there. And, how do you connect with people? And what's the art of all of that? And she kind of says, no, my view of fundraising, it's a joyous world. I bring joy and opportunity to people. I bring the ability to connect to others with passion. So I can find someone with a key passion, and I don't just force them to go down my path or whatever she's happened to work on fundraising around. She's done fundraising for literally almost everybody. But I actually say, you'd probably be pretty good over here in this nonprofit, and the next person might be interesting somewhere else. And all of a sudden, they really start glowing because they get matched to exactly where they get their passions reinforced. And they get to meet other people with similar passions. Isn't that cool? So it's the beginning of a generosity network. It started understanding, and this is what we're all about, is understanding that deepening the network not only will get you people that will tell you the truth, but keep people together that can create solutions to ideas that you by yourself couldn't come up with.
And y'all wrote Generosity Network, New Transformational Tools for Successful Fundraising. And first, to say fundraising is not just funds, money, that it's resources, tons of other things. And so that I guess it was important. But the main thing there is the transformational tools. And it's transformational and not transactional.
Yeah, I mean, look at our foreword is written by Deepak Chopra. Really? This is a spiritual opportunity to connect. People want to be connected to others who have similar passions, right? So finding them is a great opportunity to, instead of raising money for, we were talking about this earlier this morning, but raising money for a thing, a building, raise money for a cause, an idea, something that you can work on together. I've had experience doing this. Ray and I also work on malaria and global development and healthcare issues with the United Nations. And rallying people around a cause like lowering deaths from malaria. That's pretty righteous. But finding other people who are also interested in putting all of their knowledge and ideas and resources around that one, and we all together collaboratively over the last 7 years have lowered deaths from malaria from 1.1 million a year to 450,000 a year. And our goal in the next 2 years is to bring it to near zero. And we're doing it. And so it wasn't because one of us said, oh, I'm going to lead this and I'll tell everybody what to do. In fact, it's the opposite. Where you sit and you brought people together around that common measurable outcome and said, how are we all going to contribute what we bring uniquely to the table to do that? And so we have companies that have come in. We have Exxon that says, I'm doing it for my employees and my community. And so they contributed a decent amount of money, but also their knowledge and expertise. We did it with Acumen Fund, which is an impact investing fund. And they have a production shop in Tanzania that produces bed nets. We have Sumitomo that came in. But we also have Peace Corps. And they're sitting in their villages figuring out who needs nets. And then we have World Vision. So we have a faith-based community in Nigeria actually coming in and figuring out how to get the bishops there to do it, but also the imams. And get to the community all focused around getting those nets out. We have people like MIT Poverty Lab that worked on, do we charge for the nets? Or do we give them away for free? And there was a big argument for 3 years about, do we do that? And it turns out you give them away for free because they're more likely to buy it 5 years from now. Makes sense now because if they're sick now or they're likely to get sick, if you prevent them from getting sick, they'll be more productive, might go to school, mothers can then send their kids to school, the kids, oh, it makes sense, right? But it wasn't so obvious in the early days. Just picking bed nets. The Gates Foundation is great partners with us. They wanted to work on vaccines. We want the cure. That's what we did in polio. We want the cure. I said, okay, well, that's good. Keep working on that. but we need money for bed nets. How long is it going to take to get the cure? Well, I don't know, 20 years? Okay, let's multiply 1.1 million people dying a year times 20. Do you want that many people dying? Maybe we should work together on this one. So we did. And so it's building that collaboration that's the key, and that's what we talk about really in the book, is how to build these collaborations around those big causes or the little causes. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you'd expand on the difference between having those complex collaborative relationships in such a big problem. How is that different from a little problem? Because it would seem, yeah, there's a lot to go around for malaria, and there's a lot of things that a lot of people can do. But how is that different from the local, small, under $100,000 nonprofit?
Well, maybe I'll start with what's it like, what's the similarities, because I think there's more of those. And I think this applies whether you're running a small animal shelter, a food bank, up to large causes. And I think this is a big opportunity. The opportunity in my mind is starting to find people like all of us who can bring networking capability and resources to bear, and resources as in knowledge, ability to leverage your network. So what does it take to be this collaborator? It takes, one, an honest broker. So somebody who doesn't know everything, but somebody who is focused on the goal. So I'm focused on malaria, or I'm focused in my local area about bringing high school graduation rates up, or I'm focused on lowering, a friend of mine is working on animals and pets and dogs, and lowering kill rates in cities. That's their goal. It's like, okay, let's figure that one out. I want to work on that. So an honest broker. Two is a simple idea. So before you get to a simple idea, like bed nets, you usually have to go to complex analysis and then come up with a simple. It took us a long time to come up with that bed nets is the right answer, and it's not the perfect answer. It's an 80% solution, and you need ACT treatment, to adjunct it and everything else. But bed nets was an understandable, simple idea. We're working with community health workers, and we're now focusing around the idea of Backpack Plus. They need backpacks, and it needs to have commodities in them to address what they need. But what's that simple solution or idea, and what is a common measurement goal? How do you measure it? For malaria, we actually have an online site called alma2015.org, and you can track by country exactly what's going on. Same thing, there's a group called Strive, which is putting together collaborative models across cities across America and getting stakeholders together, and they're picking each city. I'm sure Little Rock's got a group doing this, but picking a couple key measures that businesses and nonprofits, foundations and individuals, politicians can all rally around and report on and hold themselves accountable to that. And then you need a small group that holds them together, the collaborative glue. So usually 5, 6, 7, we're doing this nutrition, we're doing in each city itself, a few people that says, between the meetings, I'm gonna hold us together. What you said, I'm gonna remind you. What you were doing and some resources that you have, I'm gonna make sure the other person understands those and knows what they're about. So I think that model works in New York City, for sure. Works in a small town, I've seen it. And I think it started in Cleveland, Strive, now that's in 45 different cities. There's a good article if somebody wants to look it up called Collective Impact. It was written in 2010 by Mark Kramer, Stanford Social Innovation Review. And it starts to continue to talk about how we pull these coalitions and collaboratives together. No longer is it one politician knows everything. I'm not sure they ever did, but now we're pretty sure of that. And it's no one tenured professor, and it's no one business guy or anybody else. It's this new model of flat structures that we're able to still and bring knowledge together and still accomplish something more substantial.
Why is story, the art of storytelling and a public narrative, such an important piece to this?
So there's a guy who is a professor at Kennedy School at Harvard, Marshall Gans, and he participated in the Mississippi voting campaigns. He quit Harvard in the middle, his third year, and then went and worked with Cesar Chavez and worked in the Obama campaign and developed this whole philosophy called the public narrative. And the public narrative has three aspects to it. And you look at community organizing, and it kind of rings true for all of them. One is a story of me. Who am I? Two is a story of who are we, us. And the third is a story of what we're going to do now. It's the action. And through that simple process, you can build linkages to others and create strategy and action plans. And you can do this in any nonprofit, in any cause, in any social event. And so telling that story, though, makes it personal. So, you know, for example, I start out when I'm in 7th grade. And I was walking into the music room, and I wanted to play an instrument. And the guy looked at me, and I was tall, and I was big, and I had braces. So I got a tuba. So I played tuba and sousaphone. And I began to connect and understand what a musical experience was about. So I could play my instrument, and then I'm there with others who play their instruments and their unique sounds. And we created a sound that none of us by ourselves could have done. And so understanding what this collaborative process was by using that feeling of music and being present allowed me to say, I want to do that again, but I want to do it in the rest of my life. And so that's what helped me understand what that collaborative experience is. When I'm at a concert now, I can think of the Who concert. I was in Barclays Stadium last year, and Roger Daltrey is playing Bob O'Reilly. I'm too old for most of you, but hearing him talk about Teenage Wasteland and everybody in the audience singing the same song together, and Roger Daltrey spinning back and basking in it, that's what I mean. We know what that feels like. And so we can do that when we're working on causes together, and when you know it connects. And so giving people that experience, all of a sudden it awakes them. And I have people that I've brought in, and there's masses of people over 50 years old. I use that as a roundabout number, but usually it's after kids go up to high school, and who want to get back and want to do more than just work on their own egos or their own selves. And so let's empower them. Let's get them out. Let's get them connected to these causes. And how do we do that? And how do we match them up? And so I have one guy, a friend of mine, who is in private equity still in New York, and we hooked him up to Millennium Promise, and now he's been working with us with the UN and Endeavor. Prevention of mother-child transmission of AIDS has been his thing, and he's had huge impact. Deaths are down from 650,000 mothers to 250,000 in the developing world and going down. So his wife came in a couple of years ago, and she said, Jeff, I don't know what happened to John, but don't mess it up. People like to sit with him at dinner now. He actually talks about something different. And so it's a way to connect to others. And he basically came to me later and he said, you know, deals are better. People are bringing me things because the trust level is up, because they know who I really kind of am. And his eyes are sparkling. So why not do that more?
Why is it hard then to do this? Why can't every fundraiser and every board member and every giver and doer, why can't they just be vulnerable and open up and connect and find their passion? What has set it up to fail, I guess, and how do we not make those mistakes?
Because we're all still working on it, right? We're not all there. We have walls that go up. So figuring out what those are and how to lower them. So there's experiences that you can have, right? There's ways of opening up to others to understand that it's not about money. That's the issue. Because how do I get more money? Money's there. It's actually, how do you find people who you can be partners with that'll put all the resources together to accomplish the goal? If you find people coming together and they go to a donor, they're much more likely to get funded. Universities, when I talk to universities, having two deans actually go to a donor and say, we're together on this idea, the donor's like, really? You figured out how to work together? Think about two nonprofits and working in the same community on a similar area. They're working together. The nonprofit world has issues as to walls as well between their own organizations, right? How do you get a board to actually work well with a management team? When I sit and talk and train boards, Usually, I'm sitting with the management team going, I need a lot more out of my board. I'm really frustrated. They just show up at the board meeting, or they don't give me enough money, or they're paying. But I'd like more out of them, but I'm afraid to ask. And usually when you sit there and talk to board members of nonprofits, they say, you know, it's kind of boring going to these board meetings, and they get to get the presentation from the management team, and, you know, I don't know why I go, and should I really? And I wish I really had a reason to come. I wish I could add more value. So it's like this, you know, flying over top of each other and not connecting. So there's processes you can take. You can say, let's actually sit down with board members and ask them, what do you want out of this relationship? What can you particularly uniquely add value to or do? And so let's set up some goals. And it's not just give money. Maybe have that as a goal, whatever. And it's not just, you know, show up and, you know, be a good fiduciary, right? It's like, what do you uniquely do? How good are you in marketing? If that's your company, why don't you come in and help us do a task force around that? Or awareness building. What if technology, finance, I do fundraising, whatever. And so then you can measure me. Why wouldn't you measure a board member, right? Most important relationship today in nonprofit world, in my experience, is that between the board chair and the executive director. So if this was healthy and it works well, the entire organization sees a great model. So this is a university, or this is a small nonprofit. If you have a great relationship between those two individuals, the rest of the board kind of sees, oh, I should do that. So there's a model. The rest of the management team kind of goes, oh, I should do that. I should start opening up my relationships with the rest of the board, with donors. And the other thing that we focus on is changing the relationship not only among the board level, but the donor level. So they're not donors anymore, right? There should be no walls between donors and doers. It's the same thing. They just do it different stuff. And so deepening the relationship you have with people that are outside the nonprofit who are working with you as partners, and those within, changes everything. It becomes transformational as opposed to transactional. And so that, you know, working at it, how do you do that? You know, well, take them to where you're doing the work. Meet the people you're doing the work with. We used to take people to Africa. Okay, that's a long way to go. You know, Robin Hood in New York takes people, their board, to the organizations that they give to. They don't never have a board meeting in their own organization. So it's that experience, you know, how to work together and show it together and actually achieve something together and learn from that.
And how's that different from a for-profit board?
So a for-profit group has walls, and they're there because I want to make more money than the other guy, and I have intellectual property that I don't want to share, and so I'm working with that management team if I'm on a board, but there's a wall that says I'm a fiduciary and I'm either going to fire or hire the CEO, great, but I can't cross the line. So they're more likely to cross the line between, in my experience, somebody who's a giver, a partner, and others in the management team. Now that has potential problems because the management team is going, I don't want this person with money thinking they can tell me what to do. Well, okay, I get that. It shouldn't be a tell me what to do process. It should be, I have views, you have views. By the way, you're in the management team, so 51% of the time, which means always, you get to make the decision. But you have to listen to me. Doesn't mean you do it, but I want to make sure I'm heard because I have some things to offer. But isn't this the case, really, in any for-profit organization or nonprofit organization? So I have a rule. When I'm board chair with my exec directors, I said, okay, all my ideas, I think they're all really good. But you don't. In fact, my wife told me once that 85% of the time I was right, but half the time people didn't follow me, so what's the point? So I started going, okay, whatever ideas you think are really good, A's. Just tell me they're, okay, keep me up, they're A ideas, and I'm going to nudge the heck out of you. I'm going to be after you, kind of like, let's get this done. B's, normal course of events, we'll get to it, but you know, here's how we're going to get it. And C's, kind of a dumb idea or just doesn't make any sense. Just put it away. I said, thank God, just tell me. I don't want to, you know, whatever. And so there's some way of communicating what the priorities are, what the importance of things are. You're honoring the management team for what they can bring to the table, and then move on. Another opportunity is actually dropping the walls, you guys that are development people, between fundraisers and the rest of the management team and the board. Half of all fundraisers hate their jobs and want another job. Seriously, it's terrible. Half of them like it. That's really good, right? So why do they hate it? Well, they say they treat me like a salesperson. They give me goals, they give me objectives, number of calls, get out there and raise the money. They're not treating me like a partner. They're treating me like some tool that I'm supposed to just go out and do stuff. Well, this triad of a fundraiser, an exec director, CEO, and the board, really important. And if that's really working well, then everybody owns the responsibility to achieve and gain resources. And it's not just a fundraiser's job. So if fundraising doesn't work, it's everybody's responsibility and everybody's fault and everybody's success, right? But that's a different kind of relationship, and that's a more open relationship. I used to be on a board of a culture institution that wouldn't allow their fundraiser to talk to the board. Really? Yep. Board chair had to do all that. Okay. You're just wasting a whole lot of resources.
Last set for me before we open it up for you, because I know many of you have specific questions and I want you to kind of drill down onto it, but specifically about actually asking for resources from someone. The dynamic on both sides, the anxiety that both people have, I think it'd be interesting, since you've been on both sides of that, to kind of discuss that.
So sometime if we ever get together and we have a longer period of time to talk about this, I'd have you break up into twos, and for 3 minutes, one of you would be a fundraiser and the other one would be a prospective donor, and you'd pitch each other. And then 3 minutes later, you'd switch roles. And then you'd talk about what it feels like. And a lot of the times you ask about fear. Were you afraid as a fundraiser? Yeah. What were you afraid of? I was afraid I'd fail. I was afraid I'd look silly. Afraid I'd ruin a relationship with somebody who just introduced me to this person. You know, I have a lot of stress. You know, this is a hard place to be. And then you ask the donor, do you have any fears? Yeah. Really? You got the money. I'm afraid you just want me for my money. I'm afraid that I'm going to make a dumb decision. That I give you money and then it doesn't work out. I look silly. It doesn't fit with what I'm interested in. My spouse thinks I'm stupid. My kids, you know, not really sure what I'm doing. So all these things are going through their minds too. So how do you lower those? Kind of like, it's okay. So one, in the first meeting, you just basically say, I'm not going to ask you for any money. Seriously. You just ask for, what are you interested in? Who are you? And start matching those passions. So you're not here to sell anything. If you have a PowerPoint, put it away. That would be horrible, right? So if you have a conversation saying, you know, what are you interested in? Where are you from? Tell me your story. Tell a little bit of your own story to them as well. Then it starts a relationship that starts growing. And if they say, if you're there saying, I have the greatest early childhood program in the world, let me tell you why, you know, and if you can tell that they're not interested in early childhood, what they're interested in is the environment and the oceans. Okay. And what you say is, you know, I could hook you up to some really great groups that are doing the environment in the oceans. And you don't try to oversell them on your own thing. And if you do that, guaranteed, you'll get more out of them, because they'll sit there going, this person's really being truthful, kind of an honest connector and networker to me, and I can work that system. Avoiding the question or avoiding asking for help. Don't use the word. I still find myself using it occasionally. But what happens when you say, can you help me? subordinate role. Means I'm less than you. Means I need your help. You've got something else. It turns into this conversation about, please give me something, and it's over. That's not the deal. You're walking in to be a partner. You're walking in with something really cool that they can get involved in passionately and meet up with other people who are doing the same thing, and their lives are going to be better if they're passionately connected to something that they're interested in. That's really awesome. So you're bringing something to the table. It might not fit them. That's awesome. You move it on to something else. But it's never about, some kind of help. It's about partnering. It's working together to achieve something bigger than ourselves. It's creating your own little jazz band, figuring out the parties that are the players, creating this unique innovation together, and creating a sound that nobody else has before.
All right. So we're going to open it up for questions. Please raise your hand. We'll get a microphone to you. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me? I'm Stephanie Meineke with the Arkansas Nonprofit Alliance, and I just wanted to notify my colleagues we're an honest broker, so y'all come on board. But having spent 100% of my career, 100% of the time in nonprofit management, it has been fascinating to watch this evolution from the 70s on up of how the nonprofit sector has evolved. And I can remember when asset building and all that community building started, and everybody was really excited about that, and we didn't really solve those big problems. And so I really see this evolution of collective impact and as the natural evolution of how we are going to get past and really solve the big problems. And that's just really a comment. Arkansas, I think, is really rich and ready for that. I think we have everything we need in Arkansas to have a strong nonprofit sector. And we are just beginning this path of pulling together those pieces and folks out in the state. So your book and your comments have been really helpful. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, which is a little bit off topic, is the whole issue of resources for nonprofits, because as things have become more sophisticated and sustainability of nonprofits is harder than ever. There's so much competition and all that. Looking at different kinds of mechanisms for funding, like when you're in the private equity business, there are a lot of concepts that we really are not familiar with, at least the smaller to mid-sized nonprofits. So what is your thoughts about how to help create new funding mechanisms through some of the business sector? Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of good questions there. So one point is it's not all about nonprofits. They're one aspect and one set of stakeholders that need to be involved in potential long-term solutions, but it's lots of others too, right? It's the business school world, it's the foundation world, it's the political world. We don't trust any one of those groups, but together somehow trust goes up. So developing that opportunity to collaborate, and you can, as the NGOs, be part of that solution. And you could be honest brokers if you try it. We have nonprofits now that are changing the way that they operate. Instead of the NGO CEO thinking about their own organization only, they're thinking about the cause that's bigger. And so people are starting to rally around them. And resources start to come in a more deep way. I can give you examples. One called Refuge Point that has gone from the middle of 1% market share in refugee relocations to 20% because they became this connector of others coming together around that cause. And the most important thing was refugees being relocated as opposed to that organization. Same thing with, I was with the KIP school management team last week. And they're going from 150 charter schools to 500 in the next 5 years. It's a lot of growth. Doesn't make a dent in school systems across America. That's a problem. So instead of, in the for-profit world, you go public. In the nonprofit world, there's no public other than the public. And so how do you affect and change the entire social system? How do you take the good ideas and re-embed them in other organizations? Maybe you partner better. There's a group, I think they're here, City Year, right? Yeah. Awesome. I was with their CEO, Mark Brown. He's now looking to go to other NGOs and embedding them into his own organization. There's a great nonprofit called iMentor, which does mentoring systems. And it's embedding its strength in bringing professionals and mentoring 11th and 12th graders in the inner city, which is really effective, and embedding it in city rather than setting up its own nationwide structure and its own local boards. And it's like, oh, that's inefficient, not very effective. So there's lots of people really looking at how to look at the NGO nonprofit world and how to scale in a better, more effective way, right? So that's the nonprofit side. The second question was? Yeah, the resources, thank you. So there's like some interesting things going on right now. There's a group I'm involved in called New Profit, which is in Boston, has 50 families that work together for social change. We did a lot of growth scaling of Teach for America and City Year and KIPP Schools and a bunch of others. So it's now developed some tools and techniques around social impact bonds. And so we just did our first one, and it was announced 2 weeks ago. And it's anti-recidivism. So in other words, keeping kids out of prison. So those kids that have been, keep them out, keep them from not going back. And so they've got a 20-year track record of being successful in doing that. So use that statistic so you can cut a deal with Massachusetts government, which we did in the state, and the government pays their services, for their services, depending on outcomes. And if they don't go back, and if their percentage of kids that don't go back is higher than average, they get paid more. For the bond, so Goldman Sachs is it's a $21 million, so it's reasonable size but not huge. $21 million total financing. Goldman Sachs is doing the debt. Recidivism Foundation is doing subordinated debt. So you get a little more interest. You get a little more interest along the way if you were able to achieve your goals. And then we use philanthropy. So we use $6 million of philanthropy to get that going. So instead of $6 million going to Roca by itself, they got $21 million. And it's able to do a lot more. And so there's a bond that was done in New York that Bloomberg guaranteed. There's one done in London. People are starting experimenting with these structures. So they think that may unlock a lot of other funding for institutions and nonprofits that weren't there before, right? Schools and universities are all doing and desperately looking. University of Virginia, trust me, 8% of our funding, 8, comes from the state, right? I'm sure University of Arkansas is going through the same thing. Where do you get the money? Walls have to come down. You've got to start looking for partnerships with others. And so one of the interesting opportunities in my experience is working to connect professors and ideas around institutions like universities to donors. So instead of having the professor saying, give me money and then I'll periodically may talk to you, it's how can I be better at what I want to do as a professor and have impact if I work with you as a partner. So we created this idea in the book called Avatars. And it's finding people that you wish you were, but don't have time to be. And so I like social enterprise, but I don't have time to be a professor in social enterprise, but I kind of like that. I wish it's my next life maybe. But I kind of found some great professors I love. And so I go speak to their class. I go get jobs for their students. I give them connections to other funding ideas. And they're kind of me in a different form. And we're working together as partners, right? So find those avatars. And so it doesn't always have to be the president of the university or the deans out raising all the money. It's finding the people with the passions, which happen to be usually the professors. But it's getting the professors to trust that you can work with a donor and achieve something. And if you pick a couple of those examples, and we've done it in lots of different schools already, then the other professors start looking over going, what they did, I guess I need to do. And they start seeing a model for how partnerships can be set up. So play with that.
Reed.
My name is Reed Admire. I'm a student here at the Clinton School, Class 9. For 3 years before I was here, I was trying to build a music therapy program at a state psychiatric hospital. And a lot of really cool stuff happening, a lot of energy going in, a lot of people telling me you're going to hit a wall and you're going to get really discouraged, and it's a really hard system to work in a state system. So I've heard a lot about connectivity and the spiritual practice and a lot of good stories. I'd like for you maybe to tell us a story where you felt really beaten down, and how did you, or what do you do to renew your faith or your effort to come and keep doing this year after year? Because there's a lot of stuff out there that seems really great, but it's really hard to do. So what do you do to renew yourself?
I breathe. Because, yeah, it gets frustrating at times, right? The 5th year in working in Millennium Promise was a tough one because the management team and Jeff Sachs wanted to go on for another 5 years. And a set of donors said, no, it's only for 5 years. And so we were letting him down because we weren't going to stay with him and fund another 5 years of work. And we wanted to pull out, some of the ideas that we thought were scalable. But we had to sit and say, we've got to separate ways. And so here's somebody you worked with for 5 years and you raised a lot of money for, and had a lot of faith and traveled around Africa together, et cetera. And you sort of going, we're parting. We're just not agreeing on the strategy. And so this is one of those where we splitted. We late hours discussions and long phone calls. And it's one of those saying, is this worth it? Did I let down some donors there because, now we're not going to stay with that organization and going off to another one? And it took that resetting. It took kind of like, okay, and part of what I've done in my last 25 years in private equity, trust me, we had a number of failures. Luckily, the successes exceeded, but it's like hard stuff. Closing down companies, and people getting laid off. And so it's one of those where, but then I know that there's a recovery. I know there's a renewal. I know there's an opportunity. I'll go on retreat twice a year and, 3 or 4 or 5 days and sit and kind of renew and reconnect and kind of grow or be around others that bring interesting ideas, right? That's energizing again. That's why, to my mind, this matching those with experience, let's say over 50, with those like yourself who are, younger, who have the energy and innovation, you guys give us energy again, right? And we can give you perspective and context. And so together, it's actually a great model that we need that. We need that optimism, that view that everything is possible. And every puzzle is a challenge. That's what Jeffersonian dinners are about, is having people together for 12, 15 people together, had a whole table conversation where we created this place instead of a 1,000-person dinner or where everybody's eating chicken and listening to somebody speak and maybe you hear a performance and go home. How boring. But being around 12 to 15 other people and having a conversation about something relevant that you can work on together, and a puzzle you need to figure out together that's hard, that's kind of exciting. And those are openings to relationships that you can work on and build on, right? And I think that's the new world of the connection. Instead of going to conferences, honestly, I get really tired of conferences. And so having somebody speak at me, I'm sorry, but even a panel talking at you, it's not that interesting, right? As opposed to, why are you here? Each of you ought to, before you leave, say hello to the person next to you and say, why are you here? There might be an opportunity to connect, right? And start breaking it out. And so, for example, University of Virginia, we've counseled the president to, instead of talking at alums and then asking for Q&A, halfway through saying, here's my problems. I have 3 problems. I want you to break up into 3 groups, depending on the problem, take 15 minutes, and then I want to talk to you about those. That's a different way of looking at it, right? Cocktail parties. How meaningless are a lot of these cocktail parties where you're wandering around trying to connect to people and you're supposed to meet somebody, you're not sure where they are, and so you come around here and everything else. How can we turn Jeffersonian dinners into Jeffersonian cocktail parties? You know, can you come in with a? I don't know. I'm making stuff up here, guys, but you know, figure it out. You know, if you had a number on each of your badges that said, you know, I'm number 6, and there were 6 other people with number 6. So okay, guys, halfway in the cocktail party, 6s go over there, 5s over there, and you guys have a question you're going to talk about. Isn't that better? Change things, guys.
And when you are asking the person why they're there, you cannot talk about where you work or what you work for, right? That's a no-no. Well, if you read the book, you'll understand that. Nikki.
Hi, thanks for being here. I'm Nikki Hamilton, graduate of the Clinton School, and I work at Arkansas Children's Hospital. In your book, you talk about attachment and commitment, and I was wondering if you can expand on that and what are the indicators for when you're going into a relationship that's based on attachment with your donor and one that's based on commitment? Are there any indicators that you can identify?
Well, it's following or partnering. Am I there because I need, you know, the donor philosophy is I'm there because I need some verification that I'm okay. And understanding the purpose of the donor. Donors are the same. We're not all the same people. Surprise. But what's the purpose? Are they there because they want to be there for a social reason? Are they there because they want something named after them? Are they there because they're trying to self-actualize? Are they there to generate other opportunities and to work in partnership with people? And some people just aren't ready yet. So some people become around the subject as opposed to committed. So committed side is I'm taking this to another level. I'm taking this so I'm throwing everything in. And what's mine is yours. And yours is mine. So someone calls you, I don't know how you treat it, but somebody's going to call you for a connection. Then can you connect me to this, to Joe? I know you know Joe. Well, what do you want to know Joe for? Well, I'm trying to, you know, figure out how to, you know, get my NGO going, and it's, you know, related to something I know Joe's probably interested in. Well, I don't know. Maybe. And so they become a filter, right? A commitment is everything is yours. You want to know Joe? No problem. I know you know Joe. Great. Connect. That's the network. That's the opportunity, is to take people in different nodes and groups and start connecting nodes and groups, right? That's an open process. That's a way to, you know, allow people to leverage off of your own connections and your own network in a deeper way. But it takes, it's a little fear creating, right? One of the Jeffersonian dinners we did was facing fears. Because to be a development person, you have to face your fear and fall into it. You fall into fear, most of the time it fades away, unless it's really intelligent fear, and so you don't have to worry about that. So understanding, you know, the opening question you can be, give me the time you faced your fear and it faded away. And the stories from that are amazing. And so facing fear and lowering the walls enhances that ability to connect. And you find those connections, some shared experiences. Do things together. Figure out the small little acts that can come together. We haven't asked, but, you know, because there is the ask, you mentioned it before, don't wait to ask. But don't just ask for money. Lay out everything you need and say, partner with me to figure this one out. And what do you have that you can help me, help us, see, I use the word, but what can you do to allow us all to succeed? And lay it out and say, I think this money thing, you can work with us on that one. And usually people come up and say, yep, I can. And they say, you know, I know 3 other people that can also help. And let me pull them too. And so they become a partner with you and kind of figure out all the different resources that are necessary.
Quick shout out to Children's Hospital. Nikki, was it 90,000 Valentines that y'all, over 90,000 Valentines that were submitted online for their patients, and I know that many of you probably did some of that as well. So We have time for one more question.
My name is Hunter Riley, a graduate of the Clinton School, and currently back here in Arkansas. My question specifically for you, Jeff, is about that moment when you realized that people were asking you to come to the table not just for your money, but for your mind. How do you encourage individuals, the young folks here, younger than I am now, I just turned 30 a week ago, to be open to being there to give of their energy, of their connections, really of their skill set before they have the ability to give of their, their finances?
So, University of Virginia, we used to have an annual fundraising campaign. And so it was based on participation. So if everybody gave them money, we're training them on how to give. And so eventually, when they get older, they'll give a lot of money. It's kind of a really lousy motivation, right? So you got to kind of like, can you give me $1? Because then you're participating. What does that do? But that's what happened. And so we'd evaluate each school and everybody else by year and class and reunions and so instead of giving, we measure participation. So are they doing something? Are they showing up to this event? Are they holding a dinner? Did they hook somebody up to a job? Whatever. That participation is what's important. That joint activity, that joint involvement with others is what's important. So do something together. So have an alum who is going to get more out of the school if they connect with you. And you're going to get more out of them, out of the school if you connect with them as well. So giving these experiences that allow people to understand what the complete philanthropy really is. It's giving of yourself to others for something that's more important than yourself. And that's the experience I think we're all getting. What I find that students miss, alums miss when they come back, we did this survey at Berklee College of Music when the board there, and they said, we're missing two things. Experiencing collaboration and networking. And they didn't mean networking, in the transactional sense. We need to find gigs. And we need to work well in ensembles. And we never were taught that. Well, I think that's a skill that's important in every school, is this experience of collaborating with others and the joy you get out of doing that. And then the fundraising job is going to be such a joyful one if that attitude is taken by everybody, saying, how am I hooking you up to somebody that you're interested in or connected to, and building these alternative communities that we all want to participate in, whether it's local or whether it's something on the world level.
And what was did you have an aha moment or epiphany of when you realized that they were asking you about?
I think I'm still realizing it every day, saying, they keep coming back asking for something, and I keep telling them I'm not going to give them money. And they keep coming back. You go, oh, maybe they want me for my mind, right? But I don't think you're always ever really totally sure what somebody's intent is, right?
Just keep coming back hoping.
Yeah,
And
I know,
that's the
exactly.
persistence of the fundraiser.
I think there's one other thing I just want to mention. The 90,000, Valentines. That's awesome. It's this connection. We have something we worked on called Giving Tuesday, and it was started by a guy that runs 92nd Street Y in New York. And this year, it's beginning the third year. We had 35,000 organizations working on it. And so after Black Friday, everybody buys everything, and Digital Monday, where everybody buys everything online, Giving Tuesday, we remember to give back. And contributions on that day more than doubled by all the organizations that typically process them in number and tripled in size. So it's everyone in the community talking about giving together. So it wasn't one organization saying, remember to give. Everybody going, well, that's pretty self-focused, come on. It's in the entire group of NGOs out there. There's something called Network for Good, which has 200,000 NGOs that kind of like use this whole network. Internationally, they started adopting it, and so why not? And why not just every Tuesday? It doesn't have to be that Tuesday. Let's start there, but kind of go on so that's just something that is expected. Let's give toolkits out to people understanding how to give back. at all levels. So I think that's a cool idea.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for visiting. There's so much more in this book. It is one of those, I read a lot of books for this job, but this is one that's dog-eared, and it was fun to get through, and you'll definitely be taking notes and telling people, you got to try this. So thank all of you for coming out. He'll be here to sign some books as well. So thanks, Jeff, and thank you again.
Thank you.